Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everything in between, welcome to yet another Genre 101. Put on your thinking caps because today we'll be talking about a very strategy-focused genre, tactical RPGs. So what the heck is a tactical RPG? As the name suggests, it's a subgenre of RPGs as a whole that focuses much more on combat scenarios. Most tactical RPGs, or TAC RPGs as they're often shortened to, give you a party of characters much like in a regular RPG who have stats and level up and progress, but these parties are typically much larger than in your average RPG. Combat typically takes place on a top-down or isometric grid, in which you maneuver the members of your party and attempt to defeat a team of enemy units in a turn-based scenario. Combat itself is heavily stats-based, although it often features heavy RNG elements as well. TAC RPGs typically take place as self-contained levels, and if they feature an overworld, it's usually more of a level select screen than anything else. Like most RPG subgenres, TAC RPGs can trace their origins to Japan. The very first JRPG, called The Dragon and the Princess, was a typical RPG in most ways, but after engaging in combat encounters, players were transported to a map where they would partake in TAC RPG-esque combat. The game most often credited with laying the foundation for the genre is a game called Bokusuka Wars, which blended elements of strategy games and RPGs. Bokusuka Wars revolves around a king who must recruit allies and battle against overwhelming enemy numbers, with allied units gaining experience and leveling up along the way, all taking place in a TAC RPG top-down setting. The genre remained relatively obscure, however, until the year 1990, when Nintendo hit the market with a little game called Fire Emblem. There are two main series which define the modern TAC RPG genre. Fire Emblem, developed by Intelligent Systems and published by Nintendo, takes place in a high fantasy setting and in many ways resembles the original Bokusuka Wars. Most Fire Emblem games revolve around a young noble recruiting a ragtag bunch of misfits and/or other nobles in a quest to defeat some great tyranny or the forces of darkness. Most Fire Emblem games take place in 20 to 30 self-contained chapters, each of which is a top-down, turn-based combat scenario. Fire Emblem has released 14 main series games to date, 16 if you count the most recent as 3 separate games, as well as several spin-offs. The other major player on the TAC RPG market, which is also designed by IntSys and published by Nintendo, is Advance Wars. In many ways, Advance Wars resembles Fire Emblem, albeit a version of it that takes place in a modern military setting rather than a high fantasy setting. However, rather than recruiting a large army of units throughout the game, players control a commanding officer and create generic units during each battle. These units all have a fuel supply, meaning that they can only take so many actions before they must be replaced by fresh units. 4 Advance Wars games have been released to date, as well as 1 real-time spin-off. Other tactical RPGs tend to be fairly obscure in the eyes of the average audience. Disgaea is a series of TAC RPGs set in a fictional demon world, and is known for extremely high stat numbers, quirky humor, and being much more popular in Japan than it is in the West. Valkyria Chronicles essentially takes place in a fictionalized, almost steampunk-esque version of World War II Europe, and features an interesting blend of references to real history and stereotypical anime tropes. Finally, a spin-off series of Final Fantasy, called Final Fantasy Tactics, has been around since 1997, and while it's garnered very little attention upon its initial release, it's since become known as a cult classic of sorts. And that's all there is to it. May you venture forth, and may RNGesus hear your prayers and bless you on this day. I've been Tyler James, now back to the show.